tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. Can recall law put a stop on party hopping? And world's largest trade deal comes into effect in Malaysia. Does the RCEP live up to its hype? More coming up. Datuk Sri Azalina Othman urges the Cabinet to implement recall law as the anti-hopping law is being deliberated. The Pengerang MP also voiced her disappointment at the government's decision to postpone the tabling of the law in this current parliamentary session, which was promised earlier. In an opinion piece, Azalina said recall law is a better remedy system, as voters themselves will be the ones who will decide if elected lawmakers should be replaced or not in the event of defections. Last Friday, the Cabinet decided that the bill for an anti-hopping law requires further deliberation before being tabled in the Dewan Rakyat. De facto Law Minister Datuk Sri Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar said the decision was made as more input was needed from stakeholders, particularly Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional, to guarantee the bill garners two-thirds majority support needed to amend the federal constitution. Azalina, in her opinion piece, also said that UMNO and BN have never supported the delay of the bill not being tabled at this parliamentary session. The last day of proceedings for the current Dewan Rakyat session is on Thursday. The Health Ministry is in talks with the Election Commission to allow for COVID-19 patients to vote safely. Its Minister Khairy Jamaluddin said that a safe protocol must be in place for those infected for them to exercise their right to vote.
Khairy said among the matters to discuss would be on transporting infected individuals to polling centres and if dedicated streams would be open for them. Additionally, he stressed that GE15 needs to be held at a suitable time with the lowest possible risk, as it involves the people going out to campaign and vote. In past by-elections, those who were COVID-19 positives weren't allowed to vote at polling centres. During the Johor election on March 12, a voter was fined 1,000 ringgit for showing up to vote despite being under quarantine for COVID-19 infection.
Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob and Vietnamese counterpart Pham Minh Chinh met in Hanoi today in Ismail Sabri's first official visit to the country. The meeting between the Prime Ministers is aimed at boosting trade, including enhancing labour recruitment between the two nations. Sabri was accorded an official welcoming ceremony at the Presidential Palace. During the meet, Sabri and Chinh exchanged documents, including a MOU on legal cooperation, labour exports, diplomatic training and media cooperation. Malaysia is Vietnam's second largest investor and trading partner in Southeast Asia. On his three-day visit, Sabri is also scheduled to meet with other Vietnamese leaders, including President Nguyen Xuan Phuc. Sabri is scheduled to return to Kuala Lumpur on Tuesday morning. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, has come into effect in Malaysia. Covering ASEAN and 5 of its regional partners, the agreement has been described as a game changer with its potential to strengthen regional integration across trade in goods, investment and e-commerce. However, to what extent will RCEP contribute to the country's overall trade and growth prospects? Jaideep Singh from REVSA weighs in.
If we look at kind of trade in Malaysia and ASEAN more broadly, tariffs in the region are low to begin with, especially for goods that are heavily traded like electronics and the E&E sector. This is because the ASEAN countries are already part of a big ecosystem of free trade agreements, and we have seen in the past few decades most of the tariff cuts have already taken place. There isn't really much scope for further tariff reductions.
According to Jaideep, RCEP will only result in another 4% of products being subject to tariff cuts. Meanwhile, for non-tariff measures, which are policies apart from tariff that can potentially reduce trade, such as quotas and health standards, Jaideep said RCEP does little to assist.
RCEP does acknowledge or does talk about non-tariff measures, but does not offer any binding measures to try to reduce them. And in fact, for the most part, RCEP simply reaffirms what is already in the existing FTAs that the ASEAN countries, including Malaysia, are a part of. For example, there's the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA, which has already been active for the last 9 or so years. And what RCEP does is it simply says we acknowledge, the efforts that have been made, and we are just reaffirming existing rules.
Jaidip said that RCEP is not as modern as it claimed to be, citing lack of depth in its formation.
Other critical issues like environmental standards, labor standards are not addressed at all in this agreement. And this is increasingly becoming important, as we've seen, for example, in CPTPP and in agreements involving the EU. These sort of issues are discussed, highlighted in chapters in those agreements, but they are not mentioned at all in RCEP. And this, I feel, is a missed opportunity.
Ratification alone will not lead to economic growth. Jaidip stressed the need to enhance trade and industrial policy framework, starting with building up local SMEs.
Local policy must address critical problems that SMEs face, such as lack of access to digitalization, 4IR initiatives, lack of access to credit, and also limited scope to access export markets in the first place. And Malaysia also needs to have strategic and active policy in place to ensure that local companies, especially SMEs, can better integrate into the global supply chain of MNCs. There must be an encouragement of joint ventures and collaboration between local companies and MNCs so that they can engage in learning by doing, technology transfer, R&D. These are all key components, because the challenge at the moment is that we have a lot of FDI, but it's often just seen as an end rather than a means to higher value addition. So what is needed is for us to try to reap the benefits of FDI spillover, and this can only be done if there is if there are linkages between local businesses and MNCs, so that eventually these local businesses will not only be able to complement MNCs but even compete with them.
More after the break. Stay with us.
Panasonic. Jualan hebat hari jadi ke-10 Zalora telah tiba. 20 hingga 29 hari bulan Mac.
The China Eastern Airlines plane carrying 132 people on board, including 9 crew members, crashed in the mountains in South China. Local media said there was no signs of survivors, and reason for the crash is not yet known. Chinese aviation agencies said the Boeing 737 crashed in the Guangxi region. The plane took off from Kunming at 1:15 p.m. local time and was headed for Guangzhou. Flight tracking sites report the plane was in the air for just over an hour. Based on initial reports, the plane had completely disintegrated and sparked fire in the forest when it crashed. Flight Radar 24, which tracked the plane's altitude, said that the aircraft was cruising at about 29,000 feet before descending very quickly. On to developments in Ukraine. Kiev has rejected Russia's demand that it gives up the city of Mariupol. Moscow had earlier offered to give civilians and fighters safe passage out of the city as long as they gave up their weapons. Mariupol is a key strategic target for the Russian military. Around 300,000 people are believed to be trapped there, with supplies running out and aid blocked from entering. Earlier, Russia's military had ordered Ukrainians inside the city to surrender by 5 a.m. local time, saying that those who do so would be permitted to leave through safe corridors. So far, Russia has failed to seize a major Ukrainian city. Capturing Mariupol would help Russian forces secure a land corridor to the Crimea Peninsula that Moscow annexed from Ukraine in 2014. The business of saving forests should not be left just to the environmental activists. According to environmental advocate Zuhairi Nawawi, businesses, industries and consumers like us will be negatively impacted once resources run out. On International Day of Forests, we ask him how to ensure the creation of sustainable forests.
Each year, each decade, we are becoming more developed, but the development itself must come with sustainability. And then because, of course, we are exploiting our resources, our minerals, our timbers, even our water. But we have to put the sustainable into the factors. Because if we're not considering the sustainability into our factors, into each of our development, then we cannot exploit anymore. So maybe we can use it for our own generation, but we cannot sustain it until our next 2 or 3 generations for the future.
To ensure sustainability of forests, political will is of utmost importance to ensure strong policies are in place to protect and preserve forests.
To make it sustainable, we have to, let's say that we're getting the timber as an output, but we have to maintain the input also. So we need to have the tree planting program also. But the tree planting have to be in insufficient balance so that we can exploit in the next future. You can just imagine one timber or one tree in the forest need 20 to 30 years to grow. But we just chop the timber, we just chop the tree for our own sake. In just a matter of seconds, in less than 5 minutes, it's gone already. So to make it sustainable, we have to increase our input, increase the tree planting, increase the tree planting, and try to reduce any human activities that might impact or affect the destruction of the forest. Even though we have the guidelines in the federal level, but all decision making depend on each state. So if they have the political will to conserve and make it sustainable, it actually depend on this political party or the administrative at the state level.
Forest plantations or tree farms were meant to provide renewable timber supply and reduce logging in natural forests. Have they succeeded? On International Day of Forests, we ask our guests about the sustainability of forest plantations. That's coming up right after Awani Tonight. That is all we have for you on Awani Tonight. Get the latest news updates from astroawani.com and the Astro Awani app. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching. Good night.